And welcome back. As we go ahead and continue our journey into C, let's go ahead and take a segue to look at how we can do user input. So with user input, it's of course not going to be too much drastically different from things we might see, but there is of course some nuance that we're going to have to handle. So to get user input, we're going to use the scanf function. So for example, if we say we have a number called int_my_num, we can give a prompt that says type a number, and then we can use the scanf function to get the number. So we have %d, and we have a ampersand my_num. Then we can print that off. Your number is formatting d for integers my_num. Now that scanf function is taking in two arguments. If you look at it, the first is of course our format specifier, which is telling us that we're going to expect an integer. And the second is the reference operator. And you'll see there's an ampersand my_num, which is going to get the memory address of that variable, which is going to actually contain the value that we need to use. Now, what if we had multiple inputs? Well, the nice thing is we can use the scanf function again. So if we want to do multiple inputs, you can see that we have a very easy setup here. All right, so the scanf, you notice, is exactly the same, except now you see we have the format we're expecting for the first, the format we're expecting for the second, and then of course we are passing in multiple variables separated here again by commas. Now what about string inputs? And we haven't really talked yet about strings. All right, because strings have their own nuance in C, so we're going to actually wait to look at how to handle a string input until we've learned how C handles strings. The biggest thing you need to know that in C, strings are arrays of chars, and so we will revisit outputting a string after learning that syntax. So over here in Online GBD, let's go ahead and create up some user input. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this code and let's create some integers. So let's just take a int, let's call this a num, and let's go ahead and first give a prompt to the user to tell them what we're expecting them to do. So let's say please enter a number, and from here let's go ahead and just do a new line escape character, because this way it's not going to be on that same line, so we're just going to do no line. And then we're going to use our scanf function. And remember, we first want to put in what is the format that we're expecting this to be in. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure I have the integer in here, because again, we have an integer type. And what is the name of that variable? Well, remember, we can't just say a num. We have to put the ampersand from that to say, look at the memory reference of that. And then we should be able to print back, you entered the value. And let's go ahead and just have this in here. We want a integer, and we're going to say a num. Let's just go ahead and make sure we're again in C, give this a run, see if this worked correctly, or if we forgot something. And so please enter a number. Let's just enter in 14. Hit enter, and it says you entered the value 14. So boom, just like that, we have a very simple use of user input. Now, if we wanted to do this, of course, with a double, or if we wanted to use a char, obviously we just have to adjust whatever type we are expecting here. But again, here we're using integer, so that made it very simple.